So I'm just going to go back. Okay, so now we're shifting. Just checking here. I'm just making sure that come on. I'm just making sure I am getting this right here. Okay, man, just give me a second here. I'm having a little bit of trouble. I'm recording and I've now got you guys kind of in my, there we are. So I apologize for this. Can you still see the PowerPoint?
Yes. We can.
Okay, I'm sorry. I am trying to make a correction here to make sure we get back on where we're supposed to be. Okay, so now today's topic is audience attitudes and audience analysis that we're going to be looking at. Then we're going to look at selecting the subject and the purpose of the speech. So those are our focused areas now. Audience analysis is very, very critical. We need to appreciate that audiences come in with attitudes. I'm going to do a little bit of educational talk here. I have a doctor of education, and there are 3 domains of learning, which are 3 domains of life itself. And attitudes, there are 3 of them. Attitudes are the second one. They go from the first one to the second one, which is attitudes, to the third one. You'll see this one. So the first one I'm talking about is actually the second issue, because that's the issue of attitudes. It deals with the affective domain of being human. Attitudes are impacted, however, by the first factor, and that's the cognitive domain of human experience. And I'm going to explain these a little bit further. A change at the attitude, the affective level, which is the middle one, brings about the third area, and that's the behavioral domain of being human. So we have these 3 areas. We first have the cognitive, which is number 2, and it impacts the second area, which is the affective, which is actually the number 1 on my screen here, which impacts number 3. So the cognitive, if you think of it this way, it deals with the head. Knowledge is the foundation of cognitive. There's actually 6 sequential steps. We're not going into those today. But it impacts the affective, the attitudes, the values, the emotions of the audience. And all of that kind of comes together and impacts the behavior of the audience. At least that's the intent. Come on. My screen here does not want to work for me at all. Okay, there. Now, attitude change is an intrinsic response. I cannot see you and your values inside of your emotions. I cannot see your emotion unless you show it. It's inside of you, whatever that is. But it's there, and it demands an extrinsic response. So when you're speaking to an audience, you come with knowledge, you come with information, you come with something you want to impact your audience with. You want to share so that they know, cognitive, that they value. The head is the cognitive, the value, the emotions are the heart, so that they do something, the hands. So just think of it that way. Head, heart, hands. Head is cognitive. Heart is the issue of the affective, and that's attitudinal. This is where we're talking about at the heart level. And then people do something about it. That's the extrinsic. That's the hands where they apply to it. So for instance, if I said to you, smoking is bad, let me give you information while smoking is bad. And I inform you, and you sit back and you see from the information that smoking scientifically has been demonstrated to be very dangerous for people. That's here at the cognitive level. So you speak to somebody else, you could speak to them about it because you've had my class on do not smoke, and you can tell other people that you took this class and here's a reason why you shouldn't smoke. That's cognitive. But something has to happen within your heart, within your values, within your attitudes that says, you know what? I'm not going to be a smoker. I am against smoking. I disagree with smoking because I know cognitively it's dangerous for our health. That's the values, the emotions. However, you have to not smoke, the behavioral, to make what you learned in the head and you valued in the heart by not smoking means you've made a choice. That is behavioral. I had a brother who died because of heavy smoking. You mixed heavy smoking, living in Southern California in smog, and having a person who had an additional medical challenge where he would have trouble, and he eventually had his lungs stapled. So he only had about 20 to 25% of breathing capacity in his lungs to take in air. So when he spoke, he would say, "Hi, it's good to be with you." That's how he would talk all the time. And every night he'd have to sit in a chair and have a oxygen treatment to make himself feel better. And eventually it took his life. So I'm very sensitive to that issue. Don't smoke. That would be my message. I would want you to value that. And then I'd like you not to smoke. So when I'm doing a speech on smoking, I would be thinking about teaching you about smoking because I want to hit your attitudes, your values, so that you would not want to smoke and then you choose not to smoke. At the same time, you need to understand every time you stand in front of an audience, no matter what the topic is, they already have an attitude about life, an attitude about you, an attitude about everything else. And somehow you have to work through that to get to their position of where they're going to listen to you. Not easy. Now, attitudes are so critical, but they and motives differ. Attitudes become more cemented as they are developed. The older you get, your attitudes become more cemented. And you'll see that a little bit later. I'm going to restate it. But when you speak to an older audience, maybe older than you or older, you need to understand they've had a lot of life and they've developed a certain set of attitudes based on information, and then they have a behavior that they live out. Doesn't mean their attitudes are always right. I don't mean that. You can change attitudes, but they become more cemented as we get older and they're more difficult. Motives come and go based on circumstances and environment. So if suddenly it's cold out, you have a motivate to get to some place that's warm or to wear warmer clothes. Earlier, about a month or so ago, I was wearing short pants all the time and a t-shirt. So I still got a t-shirt on because I'm in a house here, but I don't have shorts on. I have all my legs covered. Why? My motive is to stay warmer. I've got a window open here and the room's a little bit cooler. And therefore, I have a motive to stay warmer right now and wear a little warmer clothes. My circumstances, my environment has changed, and that has made my motives shift. Attitudes become more and more stable. Motives come and go based on circumstances. When you face an audience, that's always the case. Now, attitudes and beliefs differ. Now, beliefs are cognitive oriented. Again, cognitive oriented. Attitudes are affective from the value and feelings from the heart. So the beliefs are head, attitudes are affective here. And when you're working with people, when you're talking to people, never forget cognitive, affective, behavioral, head, heart, hands. Always think about that. You don't have to use those words in talking to your audience, but you do need to understand that attitudes and beliefs differ. Again, attitudes, that middle part, the affective domain. Cognitive, okay, is about the head. And there's six critical steps. We're not going through those. Attitudes about the heart. And out of those two, you want now my computer wants to act up here. I have no idea why that's doing this to me. So therefore, there are three components of attitudes. First, the cognitive, the head, knowledge, processing knowledge. Then the affective domain. That's where attitudes come and plant themselves. The values, their thinking, and then the behavioral, living out. So know, value, apply are kind of what you're thinking about when you're public, should be about when you're public speaking. Characteristics of attitudes. There are variances of attitudes. There are two key ones here, and I'll just get them down. First, high intensity, okay, and then low intensity. High intensity, for instance, if somebody pointed a gun at you, it would be highly intense. We had that happen in a class, not at Trinity, but when I was at Oregon State University, where a student had to use an object. They pulled out a pistol from a bag, and he pointed the pistol at a person in front of him and cocked the hammer of the pistol and said to him, "You've got 10 seconds to think about the most important thing in your life." That student was shaken up. Do not do that. High intensity. That student got in trouble with the administration of Trinity Western University. It was a very poorly thought out idea. But you do, high intensity impacts attitudes, okay? When 9/11 took place, I was in a pastoral position and teaching and living right where I am now. And that night I went to our church, and we had about 4,000 or 5,000 people that attended the church. We had an auditorium that only sat about 1,400 at a time. So we had several services, but everybody came at the same time, or many people came, and that auditorium was packed. In fact, they had another room packed. And somewhere the administration asked me to speak, and I wasn't the lead pastor, to speak to the audience. And so I did. It was a high intense moment. People were shaken up. The United States was attacked. The two towers came down, and many lives were lost. And everybody was very, very sensitive. High intensity. A hostile audience because of your topic. Maybe they're angry at you too. I've had that experience. I've had more than once. And I remember it was a high intense situation. I'm going to use one of them as an illustration next week specifically to talk through a few things in the introductions. High intensity can be one of the attitudes. Low intensity is a student talking about becoming an example, about becoming a student at Trinity Western University, and that student's talking to you, and you're already a student at Trinity Western University, and you're thinking like, come on, I don't need this. I'm already a student there. There's no intensity there at all. Or a presentation about using suntan lotion in January, or right now today, you certainly wouldn't need to put suntan lotion on yourself going outside today. That'd be very low intensity. It's kind of like, not very important at this point, so why should I listen? Low intensity. And you can have middle intensity in the midst of this. It's not always just high or low, it can be middle ground. So the variances of attitudes that your audience has, both in regard to when they walk into your class and when they listen to your topic, can be very different from high intensity to low intensity. And we need to be aware of that. When I have spoken in funerals, I've spoken in funerals where the person was not really old. And there's high intensity, the pain of losing somebody so young, relatively speaking. It was high, but not as high intensity at losing a grandma or grandpa who'd lived into their 90s. Okay, so you can have high intensity and you can have low intensity in attitudes. You just need to be aware that they exist, and they do exist. An attitude comes to mind only when circumstances cause a person to be aware of them. An attitude comes to mind only when circumstances causes a person to be aware of them. We create attitudes. We don't always talk about those attitudes, but when somebody begins to address an attitude, it is very quick that it can come to our mind and be something remembered. And it can raise the intensity in the moment. The title of your thoughts, if people know about it before, can also raise intensity or lower intensity for that matter. Attitudes are critical. People walk in with attitudes and they simply are there. So you need to always be kind of aware of that reality. Okay. Attitudes can be positive. Okay. Attitudes can be positive, or quite frankly, they can be negative or quite neutral. It really depends on a lot of things. I remember, I'm going to give this illustration. I may have used it. I don't think I have. I was asked to come and speak to a 12, 13, 14-year-old camp, a camp for 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. I was asked to, in the last minute, to come and speak. The main speaker who was supposed to come is on Vancouver Island, who was supposed to speak, could not come. Ken was the guy named Ken was the director. And he suddenly had a camp without a speaker. And he'd phoned around, couldn't find anybody. And finally he phoned me, and he and I knew each other. And he said, Curtis, can you bail me out? Can you help me? He said, we lost our main speaker. And he said, we have not been able to so far find another speaker. And so I'm coming to you to see if you'd be willing to speak. So it kind of felt like, oh, great. You couldn't find anybody else. So you've come to the bottom of the barrel and decided maybe I should speak. So I said, okay, Ken, I'm coming. And I was there, and I arrived on Saturday, and I had to speak twice on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So I spoke for 12 sessions. So twice on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So 12 talks. And thankfully, I had just taught a course on youth leadership counseling. It was about counseling teenagers. And we studied the motto of counseling, but along with that, we also had the students do presentations on aspects of youth crisis issues. And so the students had written papers. I had the papers. So I had this fresh research. I already knew a lot of it, but it was great to have these papers, and the students told me I could use it. And so in the morning, each session, I talked about a youth crisis issue. So Sunday morning one, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. In the morning, I talked about crisis issue. And then in the evening, I talked about, because I'm a person that comes from a Bible perspective, about a biblical response to the crisis of this youth crisis issue. So I, on the Sunday, when I first talk, I mean, these are young, they're 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. So this is a young crowd. And there's about 120, 25, something like that, kids at this camp. And then there's the counselors, etc. So I decided, so when I came in, the attitudes of the kids were there. They were here for a good time. Oh yeah, there's a speaker and so forth. And they weren't negative towards me. They weren't positive towards me. They were kind of neutral. They knew we had a good chapel time together, singing songs and so forth. And now I had to get up and talk. This is Sunday morning. Their first exposure to me, and they clapped when I was introduced, and I got going. Talked a little bit about myself so they know who I was for the rest of the week. Then I got into the topic. My first topic I decided to talk about was teenage suicide. Teenagers who end their lives. And I began to talk about this, but how I started it was critical. I asked two key questions. I said, everybody here, look at me. I have a question. Immediately make a decision whether your hand should go up or not. If your hand should go up, put your hand up. If not, keep your hand down. Here's my question. How many of you sitting in this room are aware of somebody who attempted suicide, who attempted to take their lives? Put your hands up if that's the case. I was hoping if I had 20 kids put up their hand, I would have their attention, man. I'd have their attention right now. It was estimated that somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2/3 to 3/4 of the audience put their hands up right away. I said, keep your hands up. I was in shock. They got my attention. I said, keep your hands up. Look around. Everybody looked around. Suddenly there was a realization that the majority of them knew somebody roughly their age who attempted suicide, who was a teenager and tried to commit suicide. I said, keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. I got a second question. I'm going to ask you the question. If it's yes, keep your hands up. If it's no, put your hand down. How many of you know somebody, a teenager, who not only attempted suicide, but they died? They committed suicide. They're actually gone. They died. Keep your hands up. The rest of you who knew somebody who attempted it, but they're alive, put your hand down. It was estimated that about 60, 65 of the kids still had their hands up. I said, keep your hands up, look around. The room was dead silent. I took those kids in that split second from being neutral about me, not knowing anything, to like about a topic on teenage suicide, to positive. Like you could have heard a pin drop on the floor. I so had their attention at that point. It was powerful. It was significant. And when I talked, they didn't move. Now that's 12, 13, and 14-year-olds, not adults. Obviously, there were adults there listening. They were totally focused. I hit a nerve. Teen suicide is a real thing. Attitudes become more stable the longer they are held. The older we get, the more likely we resist change. That's a fact. Okay? Attitudes become much more stable the older we get. We lock in. Now, I'm a bit older than you, and I had an attitude about my last computer. My last computer, I loved my computer. I'd had it for years. It kept working really well. It was doing all the things, etc. On my birthday, not this last August, but August 15, but the August 15 of 2019, my computer died. I knew it was going to go because it was getting quite old. And so that day we went out and we bought this computer, not this screen, but this computer, which is down here. We bought the computer. It had new programs, similar programs, but also newer programs with new approaches and new ways of doing things. This computer drives me crazy because it doesn't do things the way I had learned how the old computer did things. It frustrates me. I'm slowly learning how to use it a year later, but it still irritates me at times. What am I describing? The older you get, the more likely you're going to resist change. I had to change. I had no choice, but it was frustrating. Well, there, as you get older in life, you become a whole lot more sensitive about these sort of things. And I became uh, really frustrated. So when you're working with an audience, you're dealing with attitudes. You're more pliable when you're younger. You become more stable as you get older. Doesn't mean adults who are older don't change or won't change. Some love it, some do. Of course, I get that. But we tend to be a lot more careful. So attitudes, you're dealing with attitudes the whole time. Attitudes are formed through many avenues of life. They're formed through many avenues of life. Okay. One is environment, family, work situation, your environment with your friends, with your family, with your work, with your colleagues at school. Uh, you have an environment that you create, and those shape your attitudes. And certainly the family does. And if you had the privilege of living with two parents, and they were loving of you, maybe strict, I can understand that, but loving of you, you sit back, and the more older you get, the more you realize how important they were. You know, and again, everybody has a culture, but I encourage, excuse me, I encourage uh, my university students to look back at the positives that parents brought to the table in regard to your family setting and make sure you thank them for it in whatever fashion it might be. Just to write them an email saying, you know, as I'm here at university, I just want to tell you that I've learned so much here at university, and it makes me realize how important your teaching and development of my life has been. Thank you. And different cultures have different ways in which you might want to say that. I don't know. It's a word of encouragement. Reality is that in our environments, we're impacted by values of family, values held in a work situation and in other situations. And we need to be aware of environment. It does impact us. My two daughters grew up in this home, this room that I'm in here right now. My office used to be my oldest daughter's uh, room, but now, of course, she left, and we switched it over to our office. And the room next door behind me, behind that wall behind me, is now our spare bedroom, which used to be my youngest daughter's bedroom. And then, of course, across the hall is where our bedroom is. And we, and when they lived here, we did things. We had rituals. We had things that we did together. We ate meals together around the table at night. At night, before our daughters went to bed, we gathered together in a bedroom, and we each took a turn praying short prayers, because that was a value that we held. We on Friday nights, before young men started showing up the scenes, wanting going on dates with my daughters, we had a games night where we played games together around the table in the kitchen. When Joanne and I came home from work, Joanne would come home at about 2:30, and if I didn't have to be at the office on those days, I'd be home. We would sit and we would have Joanne would have coffee, and I'd have a glass of juice, or a pop and juice, and we would talk. And our daughters would come into the room and join us. It was kind of a ritual. We had a routine. And then in that environment, we were able to pass on values that were really important. Our attitudes have been shaped in family settings. Um, my youngest daughter came with us to a family reunion in Alberta, the province next door. My older daughter was working and couldn't come. And she had not been with my whole extended family. I don't mean just my brothers and sisters, but my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, and we were all together at a campsite because there's quite a few of us. And Melissa, our youngest daughter, after it was over and we were traveling home back to BC after a few days of being there, etc., she said, "Now I understand myself." And the reason she said that is because of the extended family. She said, So many of your cousins and your uncles and aunts, I see things about them I see in you. Attitudes were formed from my grandparents, my parents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, my brothers and sisters. Now my wife. There's this chain. Our attitudes are shaped. And when you're standing in front of an audience, every person has some sort of family background, healthy family, unhealthy family, with parents or with somebody who took care of them. Some have sad stories. I get that. I understand that. Life experiences shape attitudes. Every person in this classroom has had life experiences. Those life experiences have added to your development of your attitudes that you hold to. Okay. I have learned some important things from some life experiences that have shaped me, values. Okay. Don't say you can't do it. Think about the possibility that you can do it. No, you can't do all things, but you can do some things well. Why do I share that? It is because of the moment in my life that radically changed me was when I had that brain damage accident take place because of my brothers kicking me off the top bunk bed and I landed on my head on a cement floor. Okay, I ended up in a hospital and the doctors told my parents I would never be the same. I would not do well with cognition, thinking. I would not do well with memory. I would not do well in academics. And much of what they were saying was happening. And I was actually, like I said, I was destroyed by a principal of a high school where I got the strap because my grades weren't good in grade 7, in my first year of grade 7. And he destroyed, I was a 12-year-old. He destroyed me. And we were there for starting the next year in grade 7, I had to do it again. But then the family, we moved to another part of the city in the north side, went to a different school, and the principal there asked me to come into the class, into his office to shut the door. I thought he was going to give me the strap. I was ready for it. I'd had it twice already. Here's my second year in grade 7. I'm not doing well. He asked me one simple question. It was almost a statement. He simply said, Curtis, someday I'd like you to think about this and someday answer the question, not today. How is it that the person who has the second highest IQ in our school has failed grade 7 and is in his second year of grade 7 and not doing well? He was talking about me. That's the first time I heard somebody say to me, you're smart. I don't mean my parents never said it, but I meant in the educational setting. I wasn't getting the strap. I was being told I'm smart. Why aren't you doing well? Well, that life experience turned me around. My brain still didn't work right, but I knew I somehow had to think and learn how to learn again. 4 or 5 years after the accident, I was without anybody helping me. Don't even know how I did it, to be honest with you. And slowly my grades improved. Well, all that whole life experience puts a high value that I have on teaching and learning. And I actually teach courses at Trinity Western with students who are in a program, it's a 1-year program where they have to prove that they can do these sort of studies. And they've asked me to be a part of that. And I teach these 2 courses, public speaking, introduction to communication with them. And I have a section of this class that I teach on Tuesdays, Thursdays of this public speaking course. And I'm going to be teaching those same students in the other class in the next semester. And I tell them, don't tell me you can't do it. If somehow God helped me rewire my brain so that I could survive and move on to do what I'm doing today, then you can too. Life experiences do come to play though. Personal interests. What interests you? And by the way, I want you to think about this right now. Okay, I want you to think about this because I'm going to ask you this question a little bit later. What's one, not that you have to speak on this, what is one personal interest you have that you could speak on? Write it down on a piece of paper because I'm going to ask about 4 or 5 of you. I'm not going to tell you who they are. I'm going to just drop my pen on name. I'm going to let my pen drop on the name. names of people in this room. I'm going to in this class, I'm going to say, what would be one personal interest you have that you could speak on? You don't have to. So think about that. Don't sit and say to me when I ask you, oh, give me a moment to think. Think about it right now as I'm talking. Peers. Peers impact our attitudes and help form those in life. We all have peers. We have friends. We have colleagues at work. We have others. Peer pressure is a real thing in adolescence, but it's also very real in adult education, or adults, excuse me. We have peer pressure all through life. It's very, very real. There's an experiment done related to peer pressure with adults. I watched the experiment, a video of the experiment that was done. There were 4 men, and they stood before a table that had 5 containers, different shaped containers with water in them. The water had color in it, so you could see the color of you could see the water in the containers. And one container clearly was bigger than the other containers. And so this is being videotaped. And the first man is asked, which jar has the most water in it? And the guy looked over the jars, he says, number 3. Now the camera is very much not just on him, but on the last person standing. And he looks at the jars, and he looks at the guy, and he looks at the jars, and he has that look like, what? But doesn't say anything. The second person is asked, which jar has the most water in it? Person looks over the jars and says, jar number 3. And the last person looks at him, what? The third person is asked the same question, which jar has the most water? The person looks at the jars and says, jar number 3. The person at the end, he's obviously in shock. He can't believe it, because it's not the jar that has the most water. Any person looking at this would know. The 4th jar was the bigger jar. Obviously, it would have more water. He's then asked, which jar has the most water on it? He looks over the jars and says, jar number 3. What he didn't know is that the man number 1 and man number 2 and man number 3 were part of the experiment. They were set up so that to see how number 4 would react when all the other ones who were part of the experiment said jar 3. He succumbed to peer pressure and said jar 3 when he knew jar 4 had more water, and jar 4 did have more water in it. So peer pressure impacts our attitude. So you could be sitting in a room full of people, and you can be more impacted by the values of the group than your own personal values, or express it that way. And they develop attitudes, peers. Okay, please understand, I was a youth pastor while I was working on my master's degree in Los Angeles. And I met with the junior high and the senior high teenagers all together. There were a lot of them who were sitting there, and they're kind of just getting to know me because I'm going to be starting now. It was only a part-time job because I was working on my master's degree. And there was this older teenager and his girlfriend sitting there. And I'm watching because I'm realizing that in any group, there's usually a leader or two. And sure enough, everybody kept their eyes on that couple. And finally, one time he said to me, just to let you know, I can break you or make you be successful in this course or in your job here. Just be aware of that. I went, really? Well, that's an interesting attitude to have. And he said, yeah. Kind of was true in the regard to how I would be received. But something really helped me. He had his father's car, which was a hot car. It could move. I had a 1969 Mustang and had a big V8 in it. And it was loud. It was army green in the interior. It was a beautiful car. I bought it in Southern California from a man who had really taken care of this car. Now it was mine. And so I was on the street and he was with his girlfriend, the gal. And I came driving up the side and he saw me and he has his car sitting in neutral and he's gunning the motor, vroom, vroom, looking at me like, you want to have a drag? In other words, do you want to see who can go faster down this main street, Colorado Boulevard, which is part in California near the church? So I said to Joanne sitting beside me, tighten your seatbelt. She said, don't you dare. Well, I dared. And I just let my motor all out. I mean, I burned rubber. I had smoke coming out of the back. This was a hot car. This was a hot car. And I destroyed him. I won the race. Why is that important? Wow. I shouldn't have done it. But at that point, he had so much respect for me, which really helped with the way the rest of the teenagers treated me. They all looked at them. And if they approved of me, everybody approved of me. So I was very fortunate with that peer pressure. Media impacts our attitudes. It shapes our attitudes. Of course it does. If you watch any forms of media, it immediately has tremendous impact in your value system. I remember when I turned, I don't know, a teenager, I began to listen to rock and roll music. I mean, I'd heard it before because my brother listened to it, but now I listen because it was my music. And I grew up when the Beatles were around. You remember, you don't remember them, but you probably heard of the Beatles, maybe. Well, the Beatles are probably one of the most well-known rock and roll groups in history. And it impacted I used to wear my hair in different ways, but suddenly I was wearing my hair, actually my hair's down again because I actually like wearing it like this. But my dad was like, what are you doing? Well, the media impacted my approach of clothes I wore, the way I wore my hair and stuff like that. Spiritual perspectives. I already told you, I feel very strongly about spiritual perspectives. Uh, I believe there is a God that exists, and I believe God is let us know who he is. And we can read about him in the Bible. And so that's impacted my attitudes, which I've shared with my daughters and my grandchildren. Attitudes are formed through many avenues of life: environment, life experiences, personal experience, interests, peers, media, and spiritual perspective. We are, in part, the product of forces that have shaped our attitudes, and our attitudes help us live out life. That is what you deal with all the time. When you speak, never forget this. It is about your audience, not about you, and your audience are significantly about their attitudes, and that you need to know and understand to the greatest extent you can. There is the whole issue of attitudes. Now let's just talk about audience analysis. It's one thing to talk about attitudes, but now you need to do analysis. You need to understand your audience. Okay? Audience analysis is the identification of those characteristics of the potential audience a speaker will be facing. It's identification of the characteristics of your audience. You need to know your audience. Therefore, you need to know their characteristics. If you do not, you will miss the boat in regard to how you impact your audience. So you do need to spend time understanding your audience. Audience analysis means taking time to do homework on them. This involves issues such as the needs, wants, beliefs, attitudes, experiences, knowledge, and values held by the audience. We're going to talk about the introduction next week. Part of this becomes important in the introduction. There are 5 functions of an introduction. And we're going to look at that next week. So be ready. And one of the things you have to do is relate the topic to your audience. How do you relate your topic to your audience unless you know something about your audience? It is absolutely critical for you to know your audience. When you're asked to speak to an audience you've never been a part of, don't get off the phone after saying yes without saying, I have questions I need to ask about the people that'll be there. Talk to me about their needs. Talk to me about their wants. Talk to me about their beliefs. Talk to me about their attitudes. Talk to me about their experiences. Talk to me about their knowledge. Talk to me about their values that they hold. Whatever information you can get, do homework on audiences. If you're speaking to middle-aged people and you can't get much information specifically of the people you're speaking of a bit, then Google and ask Google, please give me characteristics about issues that people who are in their 30s or say 40s and 50s go through today. Get that information, then at least it helps you understand. Here's something to understand in 40s and 50s. They've more solidified their attitudes than what they had 10, 15, 20 years ago as they're getting older. That's important. So I need to come through a little less ideological, although you can be that, and a little more practical, because as you get older, you begin to be more practical. It's not just what's a good idea and why is it a good idea, but now how is it a good idea? It becomes really important to people who get older, practical. So you need to understand your audience. You need to understand your audience as well as you can. I did some homework on that audience that was hostile towards me, and it helped me because I recognized that these were mostly women working with early childhood education, kids. I will be talking about this next week. And I knew that they didn't get paid as well as other educators. They didn't always get encouragement. They did a job that was somewhat hidden and people didn't give much note to it. And their attitudes were, we love children. We're all sold out and helping them. We have a belief system that says children are valuable and what we put into them can impact their lives for their lives forever. I knew that some of their experiences were a mixture of disappointment and the thrill of teaching these little ones. And I knew that they had a certain level of education and they accepted their job, often without complaint. And they held a value of children really high. I knew these sorts of things and I took that information and shaped my introduction in a way that would show them that I cared, that I knew them, that I'd been a part of them. Okay, we need to do whatever we can to help connect what we're talking to the needs of our audience, which means you need to know them. Know the audience, know your audience, do analysis. Please understand, when you speak, I'm listening. You better be cognizant that if you're talking about issues related to whatever, I'm just trying to think of something that you're informing us about. Please understand, I'm thinking about those people who are younger and middle-aged, and then myself, and how we would receive that. Are you hitting the mark? Are you impacting your audience? Knowing your audience is critical for that to happen. This will influence the way the speaker designs his or her speech to have the most impact possible. You want impact on your audience. If you don't care about having impact in your audience, why are you taking this course? Why would you ever give a speech? Why are you alive? Our lives are an extension of relationship with other people and we impact them and we should care about them. And when we're public speaking, we need to be developing our speeches in such a way that we impact people. Remember, it's not about you, it's about your audience. Know your audience to impact your audience is what I'm really saying. That's critical. You can influence your audience. You can impact your audience. But you better know your audience. So you design your speech to impact them. Important factors to be understood by the speaker about the audience are their age. You better know the age bracket you're talking about. Are you talking about Teenagers? Are you talking about young adults not married? Are you talking about young adults who are just recently married? Are you talking about adults in their 30s? Are you talking about adults in midlife into their 40s and 50s? Are you talking about adults who are married and now have children who are going to university? Are you talking about to adults who are grandparents? Are you talking to children? Are you talking to young teenagers? Are you talking to older teenagers? You need to know your audience. You might be talking to people who are at all stages of different stages of life. Well, that even impacts the shape of the speech that you give. The gender. Are you talking to just men, just women, or a mix? It has a tremendous impact. I've talked to just men. I have talked to just women. I've talked to couples who are married. Okay. I've talked to people at different levels. I've had a room full of women. I had a couple hundred women when I was talking about something that I taught my daughters about. That I use this. I don't use just what I did, but I talked to my class on Thursday night about this as introduction to communication under family communication. So I talked about the 5G man to my daughters. I created something, just talked to them. And then I shared this with a whole room full of women about how to prepare your children for marriage, even at a young age. That was a great experience. Know the gender, know about the gender, know what you can. 50, are they 50-50, half men, half women, whatever, find out. When I talked to this audience that was hostile towards me, almost all, not all, almost all were women. What's their educational level? Okay, what's their educational level? Are they blue collar, maybe a grade 12 education, or undergrad level, bachelor's degree, or graduate level, a master's degree, or something of that nature? You need to know that. Understand, if you can, their political attitudes and preferences, if that's necessary. May not be. In some cases it is. Their ethnic background. Okay, I've spoken to all Caucasian audiences. I've spoken to Filipino. I've spoken to all Chinese people. I've talked to people from South America. I've spoken to Africanos. I've been in all sorts of settings. I've been in settings where it was a mix of people, which is often the case, obviously. And it's very different from one group to another group. Understand them and be aware that they all bring certain values. Their economic value, their economic status. I've spoken to people who lived on the street, came to a place to get a meal. This place downtown Los Angeles, multi-million-dollar operation per month. And I was brought in once, and they had to listen to a speaker. And by doing that, that was their ticket to get in to have a meal. That's a very different economic status from a room full of millionaires, which I've done. Or people who are roughly kind of like me. I've done that. Or who are a mix of that. Understand the economic status that you're speaking to, because it shapes your speech. If you're speaking to a room full of women whose husbands beat them up and have left them with the children and no longer come around, and they're struggling in life to take care of their children and make a means, think about that. Every audience is unique, and you need to understand them. Their religious orientations are very important. So you want to know that, because it shapes the approach that you take in speaking. Their group interests. I mean, as a group, are there particular interests? I was brought in to speak to a men's, uh, I mean, it was 150 men or more at a place in Oregon. And I knew a few things about them because I knew the person who booked me. So I asked these questions, and he said, there's several things that are really important. Here's two things really important to them. One is hunting, and I don't like hunting, so that's not going to help. He said the other is sports, and I love sports. But he said they are right now, it's football season, and the most important team to these people are the Seattle Seahawks, the football team. And so I created a whole, I was doing about 4 talks to the men, and I created a football factor built into my talks. And I actually I didn't want to buy a Seahawk jersey because they were really expensive. So I went and I found a Seahawk t-shirt. And then what I did is I had my name put on the back, and there was a number on here on the side. And oh no, I put a number on. Okay. And the number was symbolic to the number was 12. Very symbolic in American football, the number 12, because number 12 stands for the 12th person, which are the fans. So I wore this t-shirt. I actually have it in the next room. Too bad I don't have time to go get it. You'd see what I'm talking about. Well, you see, I spoke to their interests and used their interests to shape what I wanted to specifically talk about. Occupations. I mean, I talked to a room full of women who were professional secretaries, the professional secretaries international. These weren't just professional secretaries. These were legal secretaries, about 140, 50 of them in a room. And I had 3.5 hours to talk to them. I knew them, and their organization and their occupations became very, very important to know that in the talk that I had, which was on personalities in the workplace, which they really enjoyed. The residents. Do they live in homes that they own? Do they live in rented places? Why that? It just teaches you something about your audience so you can shape your illustrations with that, which is important. Their knowledge of the topic. What do they know about the topic? That becomes really, really important. What do they know about the topic? Places you can gather data on potential audiences. Okay, remember, when you're asked to speak somewhere, know your audience. It's about the audience, not about you. You better know your audience. By knowing your audience, you shape your speech in a better, more powerful way. Mass media. You can find out all sorts of information on mass media all by itself. I can go on Google and I can get all sorts of information about people born at certain times, their characteristics, their challenges. That helps me so much to understand my audience. And it's so easy today. You just go on your computer on Google and say, characteristics of people today in whatever country you're in. We'll say we're in North America, we'll say in Canada, who are in their 20s. You just Google that, you'll get information. And by reading that, you'll begin to understand this is the type of people I will be talking to. So this is good for me to be aware of this because I can now know the audience that I'm speaking to. The organization booking you to speak, ask them about the actual people who will be attending. They will know something in the broad picture about them, what sort of issues need to happen or to be addressed or need to be carefully touched on. They will give it to you. Conversations with key people who may know about the people in that area, may know about the organization, people who may know something about people at certain stages of life, men or women or people in their 20s or 30s or 40s or teenagers, whatever it is, they will be able to give you information. And then public opinion polls. you can read public opinion polls about different things. I just read a public opinion poll, a few public opinion polls about the election taking place in the United States in just over 3.5 weeks. And I looked at people in their 20s last night. I was reading this about, I would say, excuse me, yes, people who are in their late teens, 18, 19-year-olds and 20s. And they're disillusioned about some stuff. Good to know, because then as a politician, they could speak to it. Public opinion polls are powerful. I guess what I'm really telling you is it's really, really important to know your audience. Know your audience. By knowing your audience, you are able to shape your speech in such a way that you impact your audience. By not knowing your audience, you create all sorts of problems. So know your audience. Very important. Okay. Now I need to switch to a brand new, just let me kind of get this working here, to a brand new topic here that we need to go into. Oh, wow, my mouse wants to do its own thing right now. Okay, the two topics we're going to look at next are the issue of selecting the subject and the purpose for the speech. And all I'm trying to do is hopefully, oh, we seem to not be getting anywhere here. So let's do this again. Give me a sec. Okay, good. Here we go again. Okay, I'm just going to see if I can. Sorry, for some reason, this one wants to act up. It's acting a little strange. It usually doesn't do this to me. Oh, what in the world? Just give me a second here. Well, my computer decides whether it wants to be cooperative or not. Here it is. Okay, got it. Now, good. Okay, now I just need to. Can you see this PowerPoint, selecting the subject and the purpose for the speech? Can you see the PowerPoint? Can somebody answer?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. How can you tell I'm an amateur at doing this? This is brand new to me. Okay. These two topics are the last topics, and then we'll be done for this session here. Selecting the subject and the purpose for the speech. Two separate topics, both very, very critical and important. So let's get started here. We'll start with selecting the subject. When you speak in this course, coming up, you're speaking in November twice. Your informative speech, your persuasive speech. In both cases, you have to select the subject. You have to first, the informative speech, it's your choice. Remember, I said I'm going to ask 4 or 5 or 6 of you. In fact, I got your names, not your names, but the whole class list here. So be ready, because I'm going to ask you, not everybody, but just a few people, about 6 of you, what topic would you speak on? You don't have to speak on the topic, but just something of interest of yours. You'll see, I'm coming to that in a moment. but you have to select the subject for that, for both these speeches. You don't have a choice. That is something you have to do. The purpose of the speech, I am selecting for you. The first purpose is informative. The second purpose is persuasive. We'll talk about that just a little bit later, and then I'll come back to that a little bit later in October and talk more about that. But let's talk about selecting the subject. The first speech you got to give is informative. There's a broad field. It goes on and on. It's large. And you have areas that really interest you. So think about that, because I'm going to ask 5 or 6 of you to I got my pen here. I'm going to just drop it down and I'm going to look at that person and say, you're on, okay? Fact is, I already dropped it on a person and I just marked it down. That person, I won't say who, will be asked a little bit later and not very long from now. So think about it. You can even write it down real quick. You don't have to write a long thing at all, okay? So I want you to understand that you have to select the topic, the subject that you're going to be speaking on. When I ask those 5 or 6 students here, you don't have to speak on those. I'm just asking you, what would be one that you might consider? Something that interests you. So selecting the subject is really an important thing. There really, in the midst of this, are 3 key factors in selecting the topic. Okay, by the way, again, I want to remind you, you all have my PowerPoints. I sent all my PowerPoints. You're not probably watching, you're watching the PowerPoint on Zoom right now with me, but I actually sent you all my PowerPoints. You'll be able to look at these and think about this as you think about your speech. They look pretty much just what you've got here in front of you. So selecting the topic or the subject, there are 3 key factors. The first factor is you, yourself. Think about you, okay? Think about you. You are a critical factor in the choice of the subject. Here's a question. What are you interested in? What are you interested in? Okay. Think about that. I'm going to come back. That's the question I'm going to ask 5 or 6 of you to answer. What are you interested in? Be ready. When I call your name, take your mute, not now, take your mute off, and then give me an answer. Okay. What are you interested in? And there's an array of areas of interest that we have. You know, for instance, I've talked about this. I'll talk about it again. I walk. I have a Fitbit. Okay. I walk my target for every 12 months. I start on May 16 and I go all the way through the year, right through to May 15 at midnight the next year. And the reason is because that's when I bought my Fitbit. Okay. And I have a goal. My first year, I figured out I could do this, to walk 6,000 kilometers a year. Okay, and some people have said, have you ever made it? Well, the first year, I walked 6,400 kilometers, which equals 4,000 miles. I walked. If you do mathematics, that works out to about 16.44 kilometers a day. I walk. Now I'm quite low today. I'll be going out for a walk later because of teaching all day. But I walked extra kilometers yesterday to average this out. So my first year, like I told you, I walked 6,400. The next year I had heart surgery. I had a valve replacement. I only walked 5,600, just over. The next year I made up for that. I walked just over 6,900 kilometers. The next year I walked just about 6,400 kilometers. The next year I walked, I can't remember, 6,200. I don't know if that was last year or the year before. But what I do know is that I have an objective in the overall process to walk the equivalent of walking around the circumference of the Earth, which is 40,075 kilometers. A professor at Trinity at Simon Fraser University did this and was on the news. And I was watching it a couple years ago or so, and I thought that's a great target. And so I expect to hit that target if my health stays up, etc. I expect to cross 40,075 kilometers a year from now. I'm in the 34,000 kilometers so far that I've walked, somewhere in that area. So it'll be close. It could be middle of October to the first week of November, somewhere in that time frame. See how I really love doing this. I'm really interested. I could talk to you about the importance of the right type of shoes, about the right clothes to be wearing based on different temperature situations. I could talk about the sorts of things you can do while you're walking. I could go on and on. And it interests me big time. It's good for me, and I enjoy doing it. It's not the only thing I enjoy doing. I enjoy doing a lot of things. So think about it, because I'm going to ask 6 of you to respond in a few moments. You don't have to talk about it. Just give me what you would talk, what would interest you. That's all. Not that you have to do it. What experiences have you had? Well, I just shared some of my experiences of walking, etc. It's good for my health, obviously, and I could talk about that. What experiences have you had that contributes to a topic you might want to speak about, whatever that is? Like I told you, I had open heart surgery. That doesn't interest me as much as that was in a life experience. I mean, I still have that scar right down the middle of my chest here, where they took an electric saw and cut me open and took these clamps, pulled my ribs apart to deal with that valve. It interests me. I mean, it was a life experience. I could easily talk about. I could talk about the brain damage I had. I could talk about a lot of things, about hot cars that I've owned. I could talk about raising children. I could talk about being married almost 50 years. Lots of life experiences. You've got some, not maybe as many as I do, because I'm a lot older than you are, but you have to have interests that you could talk about. What knowledge do you have on the topic? See, I have knowledge about walking, not just because I experientially walk, but I have studied it. Okay. And I have studied heart surgery a bit, and I have studied job satisfaction, job dissatisfaction a lot. I have studied child rearing. I've studied the issues of healthy marriages. I teach about healthy marriages in my course, Introduction to Communication course, when I talk about family communication. In fact, I had my talk on that with one of my classes on Thursday night, and I will continue that topic and then give an introduction to public speaking. And then that class is completed. It's only a 6-week course where it's much more, it's intense in a different way. I have lots of topics that I have knowledge on. So do you. You just need to sit back and think about it. And you need to do research on it. And you need to demonstrate the research in your next speech. What does your audience know about you? That's a pretty significant question to be asking. What does your audience know about you? That's pretty important to be aware of. So the first part, factor 1, the speaker, yourself. What are you interested in? What experiences have you had? What knowledge do you have on the topic? What does your audience know about you? I told you I was going to ask some of you to give me a thought related to what interests you. And when I dropped this pen on here, actually, I'm not even sure if Colin, are you here? Is Colin here? I'm not sure that he is here. I didn't see his name down. So, I'm going to start with you, Bridge. what is a topic that really would interest you? You don't have to talk on that in this class. I'm just saying what's one topic that might be very interesting for you to consider? Bridge.
It's actually very easy. I have always been interested in space and energy. So yeah, it would be space.
On space.
Yeah.
That's an intriguing topic. Are you thinking about going into space, or it just interests you as from a scientific perspective, or?
Mm, so there was this video where I saw how aliens could exist, but my interest is not towards aliens, but it's about how as humans we have to work towards having more energy
Okay,
so that we can become more of an intergalactic species and travel to other planets or galaxies and things like that.
great. That's a great topic. I'm not saying you have to talk on that, but I'm just saying you said it was easy because that's something that immediately came to your mind that interests you.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good topic. Karina, what would be a topic? You don't have to talk as much as Bridge did. You just give the topic what you like to talk about.
I would like to talk about the hiking maybe, and
Excellent.
one of the experience I joined before.
Okay,
Yeah.
hiking. Hiking is a great topic
Yeah.
to talk about. No, it is. It's a great topic. I like that topic. There's a lot of places you could take that. It sounds like you like like hiking because you must obviously do it. And
Yes.
so, yeah, right. So that's a great topic. And one thing I would say, if you ever decide to talk on hiking, make sure you tell us. It's important that we properly prepare ourselves by having the right equipment to do it.
Yeah.
Very, very important. No, that's an excellent topic. Not that you don't have to talk on that one, but that's an excellent topic. How about you, Laura? What would be a topic you might enjoy talking about?
Well, I've been thinking about it, and I don't know really. I don't know. It's because this week I have so much homework, and then my brain it's like fried.
Laura,
But I don't know. I really like to read a lot.
okay, yeah,
So
I think you mentioned
COVID
that in your
has
speech.
given me the opportunity to read
Right.
and
Can I ask you a question, Laura?
sure.
Are you married?
Yes.
There's a topic you could talk about. Most of the students in this class are not married.
Okay.
You could, I'm not saying you have to, you could talk about, here are 3 important things to remember preparing for your wedding, or here's 3 things to really consider in having a healthy marriage.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great topic.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I'm not saying you have to talk on that, but I happen to know that you had shared that you're married and you have 2 children.
Yes, I
Right.
have to choose.
Okay. You can talk about parenting. I'm not saying you
Okay.
should, but I'm just giving you topics based on things that you said about yourself. Okay, let me go on to somebody else. How about Henry? Henry, what is something you could talk about?
I would like to talk about cooking. Cooking.
Cooking?
Yeah.
Excellent. Actually, I'm kind of hungry, so that's a great topic to think about. Like if, let's just say, I invited you over to my house and you're going to cook for me, and I could get all the types of raw food you need. What would be something you wouldn't mind cooking for me?
Can you repeat?
What would you, if you came to my house to cook a meal for me, what would you like to cook for me? What would that food be?
Like special Chinese food.
Oh, you need to know I love Chinese food. Now, of course, I enjoy Chinese food that I know, which is in North America, which may be very different than Chinese food in China. I don't know. They might be similar, but be different. So I just want you to know that if you ever want to come over and cook Chinese food for me, let me know. And my wife and I will let you cook for me. Great topic. That's a great topic. Seriously. Okay. How about you, Sharon? What would be a topic you wouldn't mind talking about?
I'd like to talk about the hot glass work.
About
The hot glass work.
house
Hot glass.
health, about issues of health,
Now it's hot glass.
hot glass.
Hot glass.
Okay, can you explain what that is?
Oh yeah. It's kind of artwork.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's another name is hate glass.
Okay.
Yeah, use glass to do some artwork.
Oh, that's new to me. I'm sorry. So that's why I was caught off guard with what you were saying. Excellent. Okay, two more. Ian,
Yeah.
what would be something that would interest you? That you don't have to talk about it. I'm just asking out of interest. What would it be?
Maybe basketball?
Sports, basketball, right?
Yes.
Now, do you play basketball or you just really enjoy watching it?
Both of them.
Okay. Basketball was never a sport I was good in. I was on a basketball team in high school, but I was a guy that sat on the bench more than I played. So that tells you how important I was. And Ian, that could go in so many directions. You could talk about understanding the game of basketball, or being on a basketball team, or the importance of being on a team and making a team successful. There are so many directions you could take that sport or take that topic. Go. That's a great topic. Boy, the variety of topics that we have already. Not one person has said the same thing here at all. I'm just looking for one more here. Let's see. Amber,
Yep.
go ahead, Amber. What would be one thing you wouldn't mind speaking about?
I probably want to say the traveling experience.
Great. It's a brand new topic, not mentioned yet today. Do you travel a lot?
Kind of like before I go into the university,
Yes.
I really have some fun experience about traveling.
Okay. So you traveled around a bit. So now you are from China?
China, yeah.
And you're living in Canada, so I already know that you have traveled just by that, okay? And you could take that in so many directions.
Yeah.
So how to properly prepare for proper travel, how to realize the difference between cultures from one country to another country. What are principles that would be helpful? You know, you could take that in so many directions, but you can't because you only have 7 minutes. Not that you should do that topic. I don't mean that.
Sure.
So there are lots of, and I could keep asking all of you questions related to this important issue. Understanding that you're giving a speech that's informative in the next month here, about what is it, 4 weeks, I think, today, or before. You can certainly prepare that speech before and hand it in. And every person who gave an example of a suggestion that they would have, they're all great topics. They're all great topics. Now, what you need to be careful about, well, we're going to get to that. Sorry, I was going to share something that may not be the best thing to share right now because it's going to come up as we talk about the next topic. So selecting the topic. Anyways, factor number 1, you, the speaker. But there's a second thing you need to think about in selecting the topic, okay? Excellent. Again, to all of you who shared, thank you. You just made my point. Everybody in this room has life experience, life information, life wisdom that would be valuable for all of us to share. Okay, not only about yourself, but you need to know about the occasion. There are key questions related to the occasion in which you're speaking. Okay, What is the nature of the occasion that you are asked to speak at? Okay, I'm going to come back to this, all of these. I'm just going to get them all down there, actually. I'm going to get them all out there. What kind of mood will the occasion encourage? And what are the time limits of the speech? And what will the program consist of? And what is the nature of the place where the speech will be given? So let me talk about those. Those are key questions that you need to really be thinking about. What is the nature of the occasion that you'll be asked to speak at? It might be at a wedding. Everybody's celebrating. The mood usually there, the nature is a wedding. Some of you may have to speak at a funeral. The nature of a funeral is different than the nature of a wedding. Big difference. On the one place, people are celebrating a couple who fell in love and now are giving vows and agreeing with promises to live their lives together, with covenants that they've given. And we celebrate that. We're happy for them. And the mood there, is joyous, it's celebrative. At a funeral, and by the way, I've done weddings, many weddings, and I've done several funerals. And the occasion at a funeral, it's very different. And the mood, generally speaking, is sadness, or they want to celebrate the life of this person to remember. But it's sad because that person is gone. My mother passed away 11 years ago on October 31, the last day of this month. And I still can hear her voice. I don't mean I don't hear her voice in the sense of my mind, but in memory, I'm talking about. Well, she was an important part of our family. And I was a part of the funeral for both my dad and my mom. And it was sad, but at the same time, we were glad we had the privilege of having them in our lives. And so joyous and sadness are moods. See, if you're speaking at a situation in a classroom where maybe you have to speak as an assignment, what's the occasion? It's academics. Be aware of that. When I spoke with the Professional Secretaries International for 2 years in a row, it was professional. And we had a delightful time there. And I can actually highlight that in a few moments again. Really enjoyed being able to speak there. So you have to think about the occasion. You got to think about the nature of the occasion and the mood. I think I mentioned this at a teacher's for an organization with all the teachers being thanked at a dinner night for them. And they came in to enjoy themselves. They were in a good mood. I know there was no alcohol involved in this at all. But they were going to have, they really planned to have just a good time together. And I could tell by the buzz in the room, the people were happy. And when I got up, they clapped heartily for me when I was introduced. And then I spoke. First thing I did, I happened to tell a story, and there's a reason for that. And the story was funny, and they started laughing. You would have thought I was the funniest person in the world the way they were laughing. The mood of it was celebration, being thankful, appreciation. And it created a different environment all together. The third is, what are the time limits of the speech? Now listen, if somebody asks you to come and speak and says you got 25 minutes, you know how long you got? 25 minutes. Don't think you get to take an extra 5 or 10 minutes and say, but I had so much to say. No, you have to be disciplined. You can't say everything about any topic in 25 minutes anyways. Listen, you know how long the next speech is? These next two speeches you give, you know how long they are? 7 minutes. What does that mean? 6.5 to 7.5 minutes. That's how long you've got. Okay. Understand that's what you have to hold yourself to. What does that mean? It means you can't say a lot. You don't have enough time. There's so much in the topics that you have. Take any one of the topics that was given just now by these 6 students. Every one of those topics you could talk hours about because there's so many directions to take that. The more you involve yourself in a little bit of research in any one of those topics, you realize there's way more than I can possibly could possibly say. Exactly. So you have to choose. What are the focus? We're going to get to that a little bit later before we finish talking here today. What kind of mood will be the occasion? What are the time limits? In your case, 6.5 to 7.5 minutes. Keep to it. You have to do that. I think I mentioned a student who tried to give a speech. He hadn't prepared. Maybe he forgot. All of a sudden he saw his name on the board and pulled out his notes from another class and tried to fake it. He had no introduction. He had no, in fact, his conclusion finally was, I guess I better stop. That's not a conclusion. We'll talk about what a conclusion is next week and an introduction. And I realized he hadn't prepared. So I thought, I'm not going to stop him. I'm just going to let him keep talking. He talked for 22 minutes and the speech was a 7 to 8 minute speech. And it was bad because he wasn't prepared. Okay. So he didn't do so well in the grade. What would the program consist of? If you're asked to speak at some sort of a program, you need to know what the whole program is. Boy, ask them for an outline. When you speak, if you're going to be speaking somewhere and they say, hey, you got 20 minutes, there's a whole program, we've got stuff before and a few things after. You know one thing to say? Say to them, hey, could I also get a copy of what the program looks like? Because then you can see what's happening before and after and how your speech is to fit into the whole thing there. So make sure that you understand the program. What's it consist of? That's really important. And I think I mentioned to you, maybe I did or didn't, at Professional Secretaries International. The first time I was with him for 2 years, 2 different times, 2 separate years. And I had about 3.5 hours. And when I arrived, I came in early. I did not know they were having a keynote speaker for about 25 minutes. 25 to 30 minutes, something like that. And this guy was well known in British Columbia. He was on a news team. He was really well known, popular. And I met him and I heard he was speaking before me and I thought, oh my, it put some stress on me because I'm following a person well known and nobody hardly there knows who I am. I was a little bit nervous. I was standing at the back and he's speaking, okay? I'm standing at the back and he's now been introduced. And he says to the women, I suppose you all seen me on TV. And all the women went, oh. I mean, he was a celebrity. And then a little bit later, as he's going into his speech, he says, well, to be honest with you, I didn't prepare anything to say. So I'm just going to start talking. And I went, what? And he spoke for 25, 30 minutes, something of that nature, whatever his time frame. He did stop on time. And do you know what he proved? He proved he had nothing to say. He really was bad because he wasn't prepared. I was grateful for that because I got up front and I said to he had left, he was gone. He was just there for that part and he left. And I said, how many of you seen me on TV? And all the women looked at me, started laughing. I said, actually, I've been on TV. Can I share the story? Yeah. So I shared the story. It was kind of funny. Then I said, hey, as the story's over, I said, listen, now we need to get to our stuff, but I want you to know something. I have something to say that I have prepared. Okay, what will the program consist of? Know everything around the program. If you're the speaker, if you're at a funeral speaking, know the outline. It really does help. Okay. Number 5, what is the nature of the place where the speech will be given? A place calls you up and says, hey, would you come and speak? We heard you took that course from Congo, and we heard students who take the course from Congo are able to give speeches, and we understand that your speech is going to be on cooking. Your speech is going to be on basketball. Your speech is going to be on one of the other topics that were mentioned, or your own topic, obviously. And we know that if you've taken that speech, you'll be able to put it together well. And you say, where are you from? They say, oh, we're right here in Vancouver or nearby, and it's near where you live. And say, here's something you should do. Seriously, would it be possible a couple of days before, if I came over to the place and just walked in the room and maybe walked on the stage so I could get a feel of the room? Smart thing to do. Because then you gain a sense of the nature of the location. It really makes you relax more. In fact, is that when I was at Northview Community Church, I mean, I was in that auditorium a lot every weekend, but I didn't speak every weekend. I wasn't the main speaker for the church, but I did speak about 4, 5, 6 times a year, and it would be in 4 times each on the weekends because they had 4 services. On Friday, I prepared my message. I have given my material, my administrative assistant, who's now handed it in. All the PowerPoints have been made, etc. I didn't have to do that. And I would have the PowerPoints so I could see what they look like. And I'd have my message put together. And I would, on Friday, go into this auditorium. And the auditorium that they have, they're using still, is like 180 degrees. The people go like this, completely around you. Only about 20 rows back, but boy, big, wide auditorium. And I'd go on this big platform and I would walk back and forth. I just walked back and forth looking at the room, empty room, quiet, nobody's there, hardly any lights on. So people who might walk by the doors looking in the windows would hardly even know I was there. I'd be walking back and forth. It was light enough for me to do that. Just getting a feel for the room. Getting a feel, and I would do that every single time to get my brain focused on the nature of the place that I'm speaking at. And it would make me feel so much more comfortable. And then I would sometimes practice whispering my speech. I'd actually practice my gestures and my thoughts, and I would do that. Nobody would really hear me because I didn't have the microphone on, etc. I made sure that the auditorium and I were one. If you can do anything like that, even if you can only go into the room for 20 minutes once, you've never been there, at least you don't get surprised by the auditorium. You've got a feel for it. It really helps you relax a lot more. Let me tell you a time where I couldn't do this, and I was caught off guard with something that actually turned out, for me, when I look back, kind of funny. I was asked to speak for the North American Baptists at their tri-annual conference. Once every 3 years, they got together from all over North America and came together. And this was in a city called Bismarck in North Dakota, one of the United States. And I was going to be speaking, but it was a kind of a seminar I was doing. But I couldn't go there. I couldn't see I had to fly there, and I didn't see the auditorium. I never even thought about that until really it was time to go there. Where I was speaking, I was in a hotel room, and I was not a keynote speaker. I was doing a workshop on a topic that was easy for me to prepare. And back then we didn't have PowerPoints. What we had was overhead projector. So I had my overhead projector slides, and they had an overhead projector for me. And I walked into the room, and it was in a big room, and it was in one corner of the room, and they had an overhead projector, and they had a screen for me. So I had the overhead projector here, so my audience was here for me, and then behind me was the screen, and they had a table for me. It was fantastic. It was laid out well. And they even had a microphone because they wanted to record it. So I put that on, and it wasn't hard to have that started up. I was ready. I was looking forward to it. And then I was there early. And then as I was preparing, a man walked into the place, and I thought, oh, he's somebody coming early to my seminar. He wasn't coming to my seminar. He walked right, I said hi to me, and he walked right past me, okay, to the other corner. The other corner. So I'm here in this corner. He's there in that corner, in the far corner. And I look over there, I hadn't even paid attention. And there was an overhead projector for him. There was a screen for him, and there were chairs lined up like mine, but opposite to me. So now he and I would have our backs to each other, but our audiences would be able to see each other. I said, what? Two of us are going to be giving a seminar in the same room? That noise of one other person speaking will be a problem. Now, if they had seminars in each of the corners, what happens is you create enough noise that people get focused on you. But when you only have another person, it's a distraction. So I got started with my crowd. I had a good sized crowd. He had a good sized crowd. And he shared something that was funny. And his whole group started laughing. And my group was kind of going like, what's so funny? Just then, I told the story, and it was funny. And my group started laughing, and his group were kind of like, what's so funny over there? And he and I spent the whole time competing with each other to see who could keep their audience listening to them. I got through the material, but not in a relaxed manner that was effective at all. That was absolutely kind of a frustrating experience, to say the least. So, know the nature of the room. You don't want to end up speaking in a room where somebody else is speaking in the room at the same time. It does create all sorts of problems when it comes down to the issue of public speaking. Okay, you need to know yourself. You need to understand you. You need to understand the occasion. And the third factor is the audience. You need to know your audience. Key questions, and this is like audience analysis again, going over it again. It's that important. So I'm getting those thoughts down right there for you. Here are key questions. What are the important demographics, the features of the potential audience, their age, their gender, the educational level, the political philosophy, their ethnic background, etc., etc., etc. What do I need to know about them so that I can be effective in communicating with them? Am I talking to teenagers? Am I talking to young adults, to middle-aged adults, to older adults, to a mix of people? You need to know your audience, and you need to know their age, their genders, kind of give a background. Are they all men, all women, a certain age group or a mixed group? All of those factors kind of come into play. Really important for you to understand. Again, audience analysis, key questions, ask. You get asked by some organization to come and speak, ask questions. Know your audience. Why are the key members of the audience going to be present for the speech? What's their motivation for being there? The group that I spoke to, who I spoke to only the one time, but they needed to come in to hear me speak before they could go get something to eat. Their motivation was their stomachs. Okay? They were hungry. I think I mentioned the time that one guy sitting in the front, many of the people were drunk, slid off the front bench, laid on the floor and fell asleep and was snoring while I was speaking. Really a lot of fun. Know your members' audience, the audiences, why they're there. I have spoken to a retreat of pastors. I did some research on job satisfaction, job dissatisfaction. And then they asked me to come back next year and do it on the perception that their spouses had about their whole area of motivation in their work situation. That was a fascinating research project that I ended up doing. Really enjoyed it. Why are the members of the audience going to be present for the speech? What are the audience's interests? Okay. What are their interests? The more you know, the more you can shape your speech to touch them. And what do the listeners know about the topic, the subject? That's important. What do they know about it already? You don't want to spend all your time just saying what they already know. You want to take them to another level. My point is this. You need to know your audience. You need to know yourself. You need to know the occasion. You need to know your audience when you speak to an audience. So make sure you spend time doing that. Okay, we have just dealt with selecting the subject and the purpose of the speech. Now we're going to talk about the subject of the topic. Now we're going to talk about the purpose of the speech. So we've talked about, I reviewed the issue of credibility, then we looked at audiences' attitudes, then we looked at audience analysis, then we looked at selecting the subject. Now we're going to look at the purpose of the speech. And I want you to know that I only have 4 slides on this, and I'll be done in the next 7 or 8 minutes. There are 2 purposes, the general purpose and then the specific purpose. So let me just get this down. There are various purposes for speeches. There are 3 of them I'm going to talk about. One is to entertain. You don't have to do that in this class. You want to be entertaining, that's fine, but that's not the purpose of one of the 2 speeches. The main function of this purpose is to amuse, enthrall, or divert attention for a period of time. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm tired. I've had so much going at me. A little bit like you, Laura, saying, like this has been a busy week. I understand what that means. And sometimes you just need to escape. And so having somebody give a speech that's entertaining, where you can just forget about everything else, is great. I was involved in a small group, and we decided we want to go hear this comedian speak who's was world known at that time. And we went to downtown Vancouver. We had bought the tickets. We went out for supper. Then we went to this place to be entertained. It was going to be a lot of fun. Examples of this: description of a place, a trip, etc., or a narration of suspense or humor. And this guy, he brought humor, and he for 2 hours with no break, 2 hours. He had us laughing our heads off. In fact, when he walked out on the stage, there was nothing on the stage. He walked out with a chair, and we all started laughing when he came. He stopped, he looked at us, and it made us laugh more. We were there for a good time. We wanted to entertain. But you're not going to be giving a speech like that as far as required. That this one you are. This is your next speech. This is just a little more information about this speech. Okay? The main function is to help the audience comprehend new information and help them make desired responses. So you want to bring out new, more in-depth information. Listen, don't try to find something the people don't know anything about, but take even something they know about, but try to take it in a new direction. Listen, I could talk about the heart. You all know you have a heart. You could point your finger at a heart, roughly where it is on your body right now. You know where that is. But I could tell you something about the heart. Did you know where the front of the heart is? Where it faces? It faces the back, not the front. This is not the front of your heart. This is the back of your heart right here. That new information. I could tell you lots of things that would be new about heart surgery that you wouldn't know about. Did you know that when you're under an anesthetic and you're sound asleep, you don't feel the pain, you're out? Did you know that your brain is still functioning? Did you know that your brain is paying attention to what's happening to the body? Do you know that for some people, when they sometime after they come out of major surgery, actually have strange events happen to them? Some get depressed. Some go through all sorts of strange things. I went through a very strange thing. It only happened in one room of one building, and it happened about 4 or 5 times before, actually more, about 6 or 7 times before I could shake this off. I'd be sitting in, I go to this church, Ross Road Community Church. I was sitting in the auditorium, and all of a sudden I felt like, it was the summertime, I felt like the whole room was closing in on me. It was claustrophobic. I needed to get out of the place. I was almost panicking. I just quietly get up, walked out, went outside. and I just sit and breathe. I could feel the whole air around me and the freedom. I'd calm down, come down, sit down again. Happened to me about 6 or 7 times. One time it happened while I was on the stage and I was the speaker. I literally was speaking. I only had to speak once. And I was literally speaking, and in my brain, I'm panicking. I just wanted to walk out of the auditorium. I was scared, shaken up. It was one of those strange things. And after a while, all that left me. I go in that auditorium, I don't panic now. Okay? Minimally, the speaker wants the audience to be able to remember, reflect on, and consider using the main ideas of the speech as applicable to them. Do you remember what I said about the cognitive, the affective, the behavioral on education? Look at that sentence. To be able to remember, cognitive, to reflect and value, affective, and consider using, behavioral. And so you want to think about those 3 things. Minimally, you want to help your audience remember, reflect, and then do something about it. So that's basically the informative. We're going into it a little bit later, a little bit more, along with the persuasive speech. And you know what? If you want to know more, you can Google to persuade. There are 4 objectives of persuasion speeches. And I put them down here quickly. To persuade a new attitude. Do you know a year ago, I never experienced wearing a mask at all. And all of a sudden, a new attitude started being formed by people talking about the value of a mask because of the pandemic we're dealing with. Changing an existing attitude direction. As people began to speak, I began to be persuaded, going from, I've never worn a mask. That's a new attitude, to, I need to seriously consider wearing a mask. Third, changing an existing attitude intensity. You know what? We must wear masks. Not when you're by yourself in your home or things like that. Not even when you're out for a walk, you're all by yourself. But when you're can't do social distancing, etc., you should be wearing a mask. Or 4th, obtaining a behavioral response. Wearing a mask. Wear a mask. People start wearing a mask. You've persuaded them. You've taken them through a new attitude, existing attitude direction, existing attitude intensity, to actually doing it. So that's the value of the purpose of the speech. Now that's general. Now I want to talk about the specific speech itself. And this is just one PowerPoint, okay? So I'm gonna get these down and just go through these real quickly, and we're gonna be done here in just a couple minutes. The specific purpose. The specific purpose identifies the particular focus and objective of a speech. Okay, I advise you, when you start your speech, to think about the specific purpose, and especially think about number 2 here. Precise wording is used in a single sentence to state the specific purpose. When you speak about whatever topic you're going to speak about, take time and in one sentence, one single sentence, capture the specific purpose. You can't cover everything. Don't try. The more you try, the more time you're going to use up, and that's not going to help you, and your speech loses its power. Listen to when I was working on my doctoral dissertation, which took me 2 years to do. It took me 3 months to do one thing, and that was to get the precise wording in a single sentence of the specific purpose of my research project. 3 months. Every week I went to my professor with an idea, and he started asking tough questions, and I folded. I went back and tried to rework it, came back again. 3 months. And then suddenly I had it. Listen to this was my what you call my problem statement. It is the specific purpose. It became the title of my doctoral dissertation. Here it is. Just listen to it. a study of job factors as satisfiers and dissatisfiers of members of the National Association of Directors of Christian Education. That's a mouthful, but it had such precision. It was one at that time in that field, not of job satisfaction, dissatisfaction, but in the arena, profession. It was the best research project up to that point done. Why? Because I'm great? No. But because I had precise wording, it was very focused, and in one sentence, I knew what my speech was about. Number 3, the specific purpose aids in efficient speech prep. Once you have that number 2 done, believe me, now you can throw stuff out. There's so much you can talk about any one of your topics, but you can't. You have to be focused. So then it helps you to get very narrow and say, yes, I could talk about 20 things about this topic, but I'm talking about the 3 most important or the 2 most important. Okay. It really helps narrow your speech. Number 4, the specific purpose helps the speaker narrow the topic to fit within the time limits given for the speech. You can do it. You can narrow it down and get very, very focused. And that's what you have to do. You have to get it very, 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 very focused. Okay. So we've covered actually a lot of material today. We did a review of last week when we looked at the whole issue as was talked about in regard to source credibility. Then we looked at audience analysis, attitudes, and then audience analysis. And then we looked at selecting the subject and the purpose of the speech. We covered all those topics today. They're big topics. They're important topics. Doing public speaking is not an easy thing. It's hard work to do it well. We need to stop. A little bit later this month, I'm going to be sending you the whole evaluation form that will help you know how to shape your speech, because you'll see the things you'll be evaluated on. Okay. So I'm going to be making sure I send that to you probably in a couple of weeks. Meanwhile, it is Thanksgiving weekend in Canada, which means there are no classes on Monday. So this is my last class, my last session right now. I have tomorrow and Sunday tomorrow, Sunday and Monday off, and I'm going to sit back and relax. I hope, even though I'll be busy, I hope you're able to do the same. Have a good weekend. Have a good, happy Thanksgiving weekend. See you next Saturday. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Hi, Professor.
Yes, who am I talking to? Oh, Jerry.
Jerry.
Yes.
I want to ask about for the second speech.
Yes.
There are all the requirement in the therapy. No other thing, right?
So what are you asking me?
I mean, we can talk anything as the topic for the second speech, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you certainly can. If you have any other questions, Jerry, just email me.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Professor.
Yes, who am I talking to?
I'm Yvette.
Oh, okay. I'm
I'm not sure. Do you receive my message? I'm late for today.
okay. I know. I see that you're here. I got you marked down.
Yeah. Thank you.
If that's all you have, okay. Have a good weekend.
Yes.
Okay. Take care. Yvette, right?
Yes, Yvette.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.